Poliomyelitis, also known as polio, is an infectious virus which has been around for thousands of years but was only discovered in 1789 by Michael Underwood. A vaccine for the disease was created in the 50s, and thanks to the vaccine, only 50 new reports of polio happened last year in Nigeria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. The polio virus is surrounded by a capsid. RNA is located inside of the virus and is injected into the nerve cell after the cell receptors around the nerve cell attach to the virus. The polio virus stops the mitochondria from performing their function inside of the cell by halting their movement, making it harder for the cell to get ATP around the nerve cell, usually leading to paralyzation, but more recently, due to vaccinations, there are few effects. Polio continued to be so deadly throughout history due to its mechanism of spreading, fecal and oral transmission, contaminated water sources, which were especially problematic before sewers and waste disposal systems were created, as well as through saliva. However, once the vaccine was developed in 1955, cases of polio dropped dramatically, and it is predicted polio will soon be one of the viruses to be completely eradicated. However, recently, in countries such as Syria, affected by civil war, immunization rates have dropped severely. Poliovirus is a human-specific and primarily only affects the body's nervous system after spreading through the bloodstream, leading to paralyzation. Polio, once contracted, is not curable and is best treated with rest and physical therapy in order to combat the effects due to muscle loss, but spreading and infection can be prevented through the highly successful vaccine. Prevention lies mostly in getting the vaccine for polio, which prevents the infection of polio. Those who have not been vaccinated in areas such as Syria and other countries where the vaccine is not readily available are more likely to get polio.
Polio will enter the body by either fecal to oral or oral to oral, and will make its way down the digestive tract into the intestine, where it will attach to the intestine cell by attaching to the cell receptor of the cell. It will then induce endocytosis, which will allow the cell's RNA to enter the cell. Once the RNA has entered the cell, it will first begin making components to make a virus. Once it is done making viral components, the RNA will replicate itself. Once the RNA has replicated itself, it will now be able to create a poliovirus, which will then enter the bloodstream. Once it has entered the bloodstream, it will then begin to look for neurons to attack. It will then attach to the neurons the same way it attached to the intestine cells. It is unknown why the poliovirus only attacks certain neurons and not others. The polio vaccine is one of the greatest human medical achievements in history, since it prevented the poliovirus from causing any more damage to. For those who become victims of the poliovirus, there are very few treatment options. The most common treatment option is the iron lung, which helps a person to breathe when normal muscle control has been lost or the work of breathing exceeds the person's ability. This happens because the neurons are damaged and the spinal cord becomes damaged due to polio. For those who are crippled by polio, they are simply given crutches which they will have to use for the rest of their life. An interesting fact about the polio virus is that one of America's greatest presidents actually had polio. FDR had polio and was left crippled by it. He was forced to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and yet there are only 2 known pictures of him actually being in a wheelchair, and that is because during his presidential run there was a gentleman's agreement among all of the reporters that no one would get a picture of FDR in a wheelchair. Another interesting fact is that polio has been around for over 6,000 years.